being made to feel welcome. The physical needs that you have coming to work and finding you don't have a laptop or phone ready, to someone looking after you as a mentor, making you feel like you belong. That first lunch when you join a company, who do you go with? So it's that first impression. And the fact is that almost just north of 20% of most staff churn happens in the first 45 days. So obviously we're not doing something quite right on onboarding a lot of the time.
Thank you, Liam. And that's really terrible, that kind of first week that people are dropping out. And Paul, what are your first thoughts on this question, as well as people in the chat window?
I think it says about immediate productivity, and that's the thing that kind of caught my attention. Is I don't think that's really possible in the grand scheme of things. There is quite a bit of work to do, as Liam pointed out, to get them on board, to bring them in emotionally and bring their hearts into the company first, before you can start working with their minds and getting to the point where they're productive. So I think there's a stepwise process required, and it absolutely requires the first lunch and who gets to use which bottle of milk in the fridge and all that kind of stuff, which is vitally important. So I kind of disagree with the premise that you can get immediate productivity. You need to go through a few things first and then lead into that. And I think overall, longer term, you'll get better productivity, unless you try and do it too fast, in which case you might just scare them off.
Okay, interesting thoughts there, Paul. Thank you very much. And Adam, we had a bit of a chat around this kind of immediate productivity this week. What are your opening thoughts about how L&D can support new arrivals to deliver immediate performance?
I think it comes down to the context of what is immediate performance. I mean, I don't think it's reasonable for anyone to expect someone to be working at an optimum level from day one. But do I believe that through L&D and other areas in the business, supporting an individual, bringing them in and through the correct onboarding process can improve their performance significantly? Well, I wholeheartedly believe so. Compared to a bad onboarding process, or in a lot of instances no onboarding process, then I think you don't even give the person coming in a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a real challenge in that way. And what I think is kind of absolutely vital is that what we're going to be focusing on is how we can make people comfortable in their first few days, and how we can start getting them to a point where they're performing. So let's come to our first question. So Liam, this one is for you. We're going to start with you, Liam. And this is from Con in Australia, who's all warm whilst I'm looking out the window at everything just blowing past my window, a bit like I'm in The Wizard of Oz. And Con asks, most organisations are now moving to new starters doing most of their compulsory learning before even stepping foot in the door. Does the panel consider this a wise move, or should we be looking to get a more effective blend of the onboarding process? So Liam, let's come to you first on that one before moving to Adam and Paul.
It's actually probably one of the old arguments that you're asking people to work for you before they actually physically started working for you, and I guess that's the basis of the core part of the question. I'd actually think that the onboarding starts before you join an organisation, but a lot of the more safety types of things like the policies, compliance, and the training around that, personally I believe should probably happen once they've actually started employment with the company. For me, what should be happening before they join the company is actually welcome to the organisation, showing them where they should be going on the first day, introducing them to their mentor, and giving them a sense of belonging, because there's an emotional need when you join an organisation as well. I know that many of our clients and many organisations actually put people through sort of pre-onboarding training before they join, but that's a decision of the company, and also it's part of the culture of that company. Different companies have different cultures. If you're looking maybe in an organisation that has a very high staff churn and hourly paid workers, for example, in retail, I think you're unlikely to get people to commit to do that training before they join. It's a job where they're clocking in and clocking out. But if you're having someone who's joined an organisation where it's very much a career path for them and where they're going, I think you see people more willing to do some of the pre-onboarding training before they join. But I don't think it's something you can mandate on people for the very reason that Con.
An interesting one. I mean, Con says in the chat window, great point, Liam, an emotional attachment cannot be gained via a computer program. And the digital technology learning specialist in me wants to disagree with Con and say, well, actually, I think we possibly can do some of that stuff Is it going to be as good as the face-to-face induction or the program or the lunch that you have? No, it's not.
Yeah, you absolutely can do a lot of it in advance, and I think there's this fear of maybe people doing some training. For example, the most common example people have is around training for health and safety or anti-bribery corruption training. These sort of standard things you have when you join an organisation. The reality is, most people when they join an organisation, not all, but most people when they join an organisation are curious about the new job they're going to. They're excited, but they're also nervous as well. And part of that nervousness is about the induction, the onboarding, what's going to happen in their first week or so with the company, what's going to happen the first day. And onboarding can be part of actually making them feel very welcome and part of the culture organisation. And part of that culture actually is some of that training as well. You know, if there's a high, all organisations want to have a high level of ethical standards. And so it's pretty much standard for most companies that trade internationally to do some anti-bribery and corruption training. I don't think there's an unreasonable expectation for people to do that training when they join an organisation, and whether you mandate it before they join or after they join.
Okay, thank you very much.
Really
some different kind of thoughts there about kind of the roles that people are in and the type of work that they're doing. Adam, let's come to you on this one. This question from Con around, should people be doing the training or the onboarding before they even start at work?
I think, I suppose, to build on Liam's point, you have to look at the role, you have to look at the organisation, you have to look at the expectations and level of the individual. I think a lot of information and learning can be achieved prior to an individual joining an organisation. I think providing nothing or not even letting an individual know about the organisation they're joining about and the role is futile. It is stupid, and I think we still see a lot of it. But could you say that everything can be put forward? Absolutely not. I think even without getting into the likes of kind of coaching, mentoring, understanding more about the role and the expectations, just some of the formalised training I think makes sense to be done on site with the individuals you'll be working with the team you'll be working with, and I don't think that can be gained via an online programme.
That's fair enough, and I think you make some great points about what is it we can do and what is it we can do beforehand, and what can we and should we be doing on the day or on the week. And in the chat window, people are saying similar things. Louise is saying, for instance, we give the people, the employees, all the information they need to know about how they'll be introduced to the business, and they get lunch for the head of sales, which is really nice. Debbie, our editor-in-chief here at Training Journal, says asking a lot of people to invest in their new organisation while it is possible they're still tying up their old role could be a challenge, so make it balanced. Michelle is saying she agrees with Liam, excited but nervous, and you need to take advantage of the excited parts. Con is agreeing about the attachment that can be gained by being there. It can be done online, but in my view there's a need to press the flesh early on. Absolutely, Con. And Wenda Kate says we've got a magazine-style induction booklet, and it sets out all that vital information in an informal style and sent in their welcome pack. There's all sorts of different things there. So Paul, let's come to you on this question about should we do some of this onboarding stuff before they even get into the business?
I think the answer is yes, but with reservations like Liam had, that if they are between jobs, actually having them have a holiday may well be a better thing for them to do than keep trying to go at it. There's one experience I had with a company, a retail company in the furniture trade, and they would bring new salespeople in and put them through a week's worth of training, and then they would go out to the branch store where they were going to work. And it really didn't work very well. And the reason was they had no context within which to put that training. They didn't know what it meant in practice. And I actually advised them to turn it around and put them in their store for a week just to observe and be there, and then put them on the week's induction training. And it worked hugely better. Their attrition rate dropped dramatically over the first critical few months. So I think it does depend on what you're trying to achieve. And I think all of us have talked about this emotional journey that people need to go on as they go into a new organization. It's exciting, but it's also very, very threatening from a neuroscience or a neurochemical point of view. So you do have to be very aware of people's emotional state as they go through that process of joining a new tribe and understanding what happens and how do things work in this new tribe. So a lot of what you got to do in the early stage is work with the emotional aspects of that onboarding process, and then later you can start working, with the production aspects. I often like to split it into two phases, where the first phase is, you might call, induction. The second phase is onboarding, or something like that, whereby the first phase is just people getting to know each other, both the new employee and the company, and coming to an arrangement, establishing the psychological contract, all of those sorts of things. And then once that's in place and the new employee says, okay, I'm kind of cool, this is nice, I'm glad I accepted this job, now we can start working with them to help them become productive, and compliantly productive. Again, there's no point in giving them heaps of compliance training if they've got no real framework to hang it, or skeleton to hang it.
So echoing some of the thoughts from other people, but putting things into phases. And Con says, good point, Paul, for a sales floor environment, that's a great way to approach it. And that context, Debbie is saying, is really important, because without that context, often you can't understand. Some induction programs or onboarding programs, certainly I remember one that I went to was a week-long thing before I got into my role, and my start date was the first date of that week-long induction. That actually gave a huge amount of context before I then went into my area. So it depends on how it's been designed and what the organisation is and what the role is. So it's really great to have those different stages thought about. And Wendy Kate says, agree with Paul, we're very clear on the difference between onboarding and induction. So Wendy Kate, unless I've missed it in the chat window, can you just tell us a bit more about how you see those differences? And Julia says, great point, Paul. People benefit from time orienting themselves in the new organisations and benefit from understanding their role in how they contribute to the business objectives and goals. Thank you, Julia. And that brings me on to a really good question from Michelle. So Adam, I'm going to come to you first on this one, then Liam, then Paul. So Adam, Michelle asks, one of her experiences is the difference between the start of permanent staff and temporary or contract staff. What are your thoughts?
I think it's an interesting kind of a point to look into. So invariably, I think we're in a society now where we're all time pressed. So we have this big kind of rush towards, we've not got enough time, everyone's always kind of under pressure or looking to work. So I think unfortunately what we find is that there probably is a segregation between how we would treat our permanent staff and how we would treat our contract or temporary staff. Now, do I think you should, or this should, well, do I think this should be the case? No, I don't think this should be the case. There is mechanisms and ways in which you can treat all staff fairly and put together a sensible onboarding process and onboarding program. I think, unfortunately, what we naturally associate is temporary or kind of contract roles, maybe to lesser paid jobs, and we're trying to get people in, and I think someone mentioned earlier, kind of press our pound of flesh. I think if organisations flipped it around and started to think about every individual they bring into the business is a representation of them as an organisation, and how should we treat them, we would all vastly change the process, because that will then improve the outward perception that we're delivering to our customers, to our kind of suppliers, to our prospects, however it is. So I think, unfortunately, it's often the case, but I don't think it should be. I mean, before Christmas, we did a global onboarding survey. So we asked 4,000 people around the world, so the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, about a number of questions about the process. And over 80% of people came back and thought that by improving the onboarding process, their productivity in the long term could be improved. So if you apply that to contract, temporary, fixed term, permanent, what we will get in the long term is a much better performance for the organisation.
I think you make some great points there, and actually Adam wrote in the magazine this month about the onboarding challenge and shared loads of the statistics, and I mentioned it in the TJ podcast that I think went live today, actually. So thank you for highlighting that for us, Adam. Liam, what are your thoughts about this permanent staff versus temporary or contract staff?
I think we're going very much to a gig economy where a lot of organisations have temporary and contracting staff, and that's going up and up and up. And it doesn't really matter what sort of the organisation is, whether it's like an Amazon in their warehouses, or a bank, or law firm, or a software company. The number of temp and contract employees is just going up, and I think it's a really valid point and question that people do treat it differently, and they shouldn't, because it's become the norm now, where you've got a balanced workforce of temp and contracting workers with permanent and full-time, and a lot of people choose to be a contractor or temporary employee rather than full-time, and they're just as productive to the organisation. I think many organisations are creating some sort of onboarding hub where they can get people to come into that environment and do the onboarding in that environment before they join. I think sometimes that's a great thing to do, but it can divorce them from the reality of actually they need to make people feel welcome as well, and there's a human element as well as maybe a portal that they can direct contractors and temp staff to onboard. And I think it's a fair assumption actually that many organisations don't put the same value on a temp and a contracting member staff than they do on full time. And that's probably not a great thing, to be fair, because the gig economy is very much something that is going to grow year on year, and it doesn't matter what.
Yeah, there's definitely, I've seen, I can't quote anything, but I've definitely seen lots of things predicting that gig economy is going to go further and further. And somebody who's written quite a lot on this is Harold Yarkey, a Canadian. He came to the TJ conference a couple of years ago. So if you go and look at yarkey.com, and I've put the link in the chat for you, he's got quite a lot of stuff around this. And Nia has asked, is it possible for you to share the report? So if that is, maybe that's something, if you've got a colleague online who can share that, or email it to us and we can share that on social media afterwards, something like that would be really great. So let's come to Paul next. And what are your thoughts on this, Paul, about permanent versus contract staff in onboarding and induction? Are there differences? Should they be treated the same?
I think I'd have to agree with Liam and Adam very much, but also I'd just like to say I'm very jealous, Joe. You've got a TJ mug there, which you are flash. I'll have to get a mug with people alchemy on it, and I've missed a trick there, obviously. So,
about the
I think yes, there is often a difference. It's almost inevitable in a sense, but of course, as Liam points out, some of these contractors stay for an awful long time. I think it comes back to, as you're bringing either a contractor or a new permanent staff or of anybody into the organisation, you need to think, what do I want them to say when they go home at the end of their first day? When somebody significant to them says, how was your first day at your new job? What do you want them to say at that point? So your induction needs to be set up in such a way so they answer that question in the way you would wish them to answer it. And then think about, well, what do you want to say at the second day? Regardless of whether they are a temp or permanent or a long-term contractor or whatever. So I think if you start thinking of it in those terms, and rather than separating out these different styles of work or whatever, or whether they're senior or whether they're junior, what do you want them to say to their partner at the end of their first day? And so on through the first few weeks.
Yeah.
Really important you get that right first. And then you can start, and eventually they'll start saying, I'm really glad I took that job. This is a great place to be. I'm chuffed to be here. I really want to start doing and contributing to what this company stands for and what they're doing, because I believe in them. I want to be part of this tribe. So again, it's that emotional journey you want to take them on. But that's the litmus test. End of the first day. What do you want them to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, when we were talking about the webinar before today, there we go, that's what I'm trying to say, we were talking about that. I've got a colleague and a friend who's just started a new job, and they literally said to me the night before, yeah, it's okay, rather than it's amazing and exciting and I'm really pleased and proud to be there. And Con makes a great point, what about their 550th day? And we want them to talk about the company for a few years, and obviously in a positive light as well. So I think that Con is absolutely right, but that does move from onboarding into kind of that next stage.
But Con also makes a very good point in the chat that if they're temporary contracting worker, they may have multiple employers. But the next part of this is, well, if they've got multiple employers, then we're competing for their time and we're competing for their talent. So you want them more vested in you than the other. It's a competitive marketplace. We've got the highest number of job vacancies since 2008 in the UK. We've got 1.1 million job vacancies at the moment. So, part of the reason why companies are going through contractors and temp employees is because it's the way they can get the talent. It's such a competitive marketplace, and onboarding is part of actually bringing in the best talent. And just because someone's temporary doesn't mean they're not highly valued. And if you don't treat them with value and bring them well into the organisation, but someone who's competing for the time does, they're more likely to spend the time with that other party. So
and I definitely see that as somebody, I'm not so much a contractor, but as a consultant or an external provider, I'm definitely seeing that where people are almost courting me rather than me trying to win their business in some cases. Not all cases, sadly, but certainly that's kind of a little bit of a difference. There's some great chat going on in the chat window, and Abby has shared the report, that onboarding global report. So thank you very much for that, Abby. So let's move on to our next question. So Joe Wade, this is from you. And I'm going to come to Adam first on this one. So the question is, how much are induction programs being designed around the differences in learning styles between generations? Now, I don't want to get into a massive learning styles and generations debate, but we are going to address that. In particular around the use of technology and length of sessions. So Adam, let's come to you first on that one, and then we'll come to Paul and Liam.
Is that because I'm the youngest and probably have the shortest attention span?
Yeah, because otherwise we just think we get a sensible answer from you.
I think it's a good point. I mean, honestly, I think at most barely. Going back to the survey we completed, 2/3 of individuals said that they didn't receive a full training or have a sufficient induction plan. So to even start thinking about how we're going to blend the styles based on generational learning, I think is utopia, but I also think is miles away. I don't completely buy into the argument that generations have complete differences. I mean, look, we're all on an interactive session today. We're all using the technology to be able to communicate. I think that should be seen throughout businesses and shouldn't be just kind of limited or targeted at a particular generation. But I think we are just so far away from most organisations, not all, but most organisations even starting to think in that way. I still think we've got a huge amount of organisations that put little to no focus on the onboarding process. They don't think about the needs of the individuals coming in, and I think you mentioned earlier about that almost that fight for talent, which I do see happening a lot more. You have really hard-working recruitment functions, and then this onboarding process just almost seems to fall between the cracks in a lot of occasions. People not taking account. So to answer Joe's question, I think we're very far away from that at this stage.
Thank you, Liam, very much for that. And who did I say next? Paul, I think. Paul, what are your thoughts on how are we catering for different learning styles between generations, especially around technology and length of sessions?
I think this learning styles thing is a red herring wherever it turns up. I've yet to see any significant evidence that trying to cater to different learning styles makes a significant difference in terms of how well people learn. I'm not saying that learning styles in themselves don't exist. It's just that catering for them doesn't seem to have a great deal of impact. I think it's really important when people are coming in that you have a variety of different informational mediums available to them. If they have that, they get the chance to choose. So I think it's important that there is some blend, some different approaches and channels, but you're going to get that anyway because of the informal nature of a lot of onboarding is almost has to be informal by definition because it's with the team, it's with other people. So some jobs have a lot more technical and other things that they have to learn prior to starting at the coalface. Others they can get going and learn as they go. So again, it depends very much on the type of job, what they have to learn, what compliance issues might be in place before they start, what risk management is in place against them making a mistake when they are underway and so on. I think it's far more important not to overwhelm them with information when, quite frankly, they're in a a startup period where they are still wondering, do I even want to be part of this tribe? Before they, you start loading them with all this extra stuff. So I think the learning styles thing is a complete red herring in this context.
Thank you very much, Paul. And Liam, what are your thoughts on this one?
I agree completely with Adam and Paul. I mean, maybe one slight difference in one area, maybe, but I don't think it makes any difference at all whether someone is, that cliche term, millennial or silver surfer or whatever it may be, Gen X, and Y. It doesn't matter. Onboarding is important to everyone. I don't think the styles that people appreciate are vastly different either. People always want to feel welcome. They want the basic physical needs to do their job. That's getting paid, working in a safe environment, being made to feel welcome. I think maybe the only difference that we've seen is the form factor, and by that I mean how they're accessing pre-onboarding. We see it from the application when people actually apply for jobs that I'm not going to use the cliche terms, but the younger generations predominantly are applying via mobile phone on job apps and job boards, while maybe the older generations, such as myself, actually are slightly more old-fashioned in actually how we go about applying for jobs. And I think maybe that's the only difference that we're seeing, is maybe there is a generational difference in how people access the onboarding information, be that via an app. But saying that, I think that's also our preconceptions as well. We think that people do things in a different way. I think all of us on this call have had a bad experience of onboarding. We walked into work and there hasn't even been a laptop for us to use. And I don't think it matters whether
Thank you for that. And some stuff in the chat window is doing some good stuff. I've shared a link about curated resources about learning styles, very specifically about learning styles to have a look at there. John has shared our Training Journal podcast, where we cover learning styles in the very first podcast, where it was all a bit new to me and John. And also we talked about some millennial controversy as well in one of our podcasts. So some food for thought there, but I really like what you're saying about, well, actually, every generation kind of has their own thoughts and areas and needs, but actually there's a lot of similarity between those as well. Let's come to Debbie Carter. Let's open up your microphone. Debbie is our editor-in-chief. And what are your thoughts so far, Debbie? Absolutely, very.
I think what strikes me is that what we're talking about here throughout is actually valuing the people that work for you. So right from the start, making sure they feel comfortable when they arrive, that they've got everything they need to do a good job. But actually it's about making sure that the managers are giving them the support they need. And that's an ongoing process. So it's induction or onboarding or whatever is the start of the process. But what organisations need to be doing is looking at the whole joined up thing, and that actually treating your people well starts when they begin, and it has to carry on. You have to keep checking in with people, and it's the manager's role to keep that process going. So they have to be behind the onboarding or the introductions as they come into the organisation, and that must never stop.
As always, thank you, Debbie. And we're going to move into another area. So this is from the chat window a little bit earlier on. So let me just paste these back into the chat window. And Con says, oh, Debbie, treating people as people, so important. Yeah, really good point there, mate. Thank you. So I'm just going to paste these back into the chat window. So Scott Leslie said earlier on, it can be seen that onboarding is only the first few weeks. And in my experience, we need to look further than this and think about the first 12 months. And Sarah Lewis said, we're currently redesigning our induction program and envisage it to be over a 12-month period. So let's come to Paul on this one. Paul, what are your thoughts about the induction period being that long, if you like?
I think I go back to my earlier thing about phasing it and thinking what you're trying to achieve at each phase. And I think we talked ages back, Joe, about the dog sniff test. When whenever two dogs meet in the street, they typically sniff each other's tails. And they're trying to decide whether the other dog passes a sniff test, or whether they're going to have a fight, or whether they're going to play together, or whether they're just going to walk off and ignore each other. And they will do one of those things. So you can think about when someone starts at a company, the sniff test is going on. The new starter is doing the sniff test on the employer, saying, do I want to play with this person? Do I want to fight them? Do I want to walk away? And eventually they'll make a decision about that, one way or the other, depending on what that sniff test turns up. And likewise, the employer is doing the same sniff test on the new employee, trying to decide whether their decision at the recruitment process was correct, and that did we actually employ someone we want to keep. Now, once that sniff test has been passed and there's an agreement on both sides, in other words, both dogs do say, let's go and play, then you can start getting them into this productive arena and starting to get compliantly productive. And of course, that's an ongoing process that can easily take 12 months. It can take 12 years in some jobs. So it's a matter of saying, when are we doing an induction? When are we doing onboarding? When are we doing, and then ongoing skills and production and performance development? So there's this whole pattern. So it kind of never really stops, but what it does is morph into general employee development beyond the first stage. How much of that you want to call onboarding, that's up to you. But it isn't just a stop-start process. It's an ongoing thing and should be ongoing all the way through. And it should start pre-boarding as well, as we've already discussed, where possible and where appropriate, and with the right kind of materials. So just think about
I think we're having a couple of...
Anyway, so that's what I'll leave you with today. Is that,
if nothing else, that's
I've
it.
left you with the sniff test now. You'll all remember that.
I'm going to come up to you and have a little bit of a sniff and see what I can find out. No, apologies. I think we're having a tiny bit of
I want to hug
to
you,
talk over you there, Paul. And in the chat window, Michelle says, I can see that if they're working for a perfume company or something similar. Let's leave it on that note, Michelle. I think that's the nice note. Okay, Liam, what are your thoughts about, how long should an onboarding or induction program be? Is it a year? Is it more? Is it stop-start?
Okay, I think it actually largely depends on the type of role as well. I think that's one of the things we should also. Some roles probably need less time for the onboarding, and it's maybe quite a technical, functional role. And I think that maybe the onboarding process can be quite swift, and the domain expertise you need to do that role is less. And maybe there's expectation there's a high level of staff turnover as well, and that's just the reality of some industries, maybe hospitality or retail. But then if I just look at a real world example of my own company, we hire in people called solution architects who are quite technical. They do demos of software, they create the landscape of how the software is going to work in an organization. Our onboarding process and getting those people productive was till we could get them out in the field and working with our clients was 9 months, and they were hiring people who are very experienced. And with a really good onboarding process, really good training, really good mentoring, and actually just improving the process, we've reduced it down to 6 months. And I don't think our story is any different to many companies with this challenge. That we want, these people are quite expensive to employ, and they're very valuable, and we want to become productive as soon as possible. But the danger is, as Paul mentioned, that we've got them productive after 6 months. Do we stop them? No. We have to keep investing in them, keep training, keep developing them as well. And that's part of what we all do within a training development world. We just keep people coming through the organisation. I think the other part as well around onboarding is that the broader development around their goals. What are their goals for the first 6 months, 9 months, a year, and where they want to go in the organisation. But that's a key part to actually retain the people as they come through. But the number one thing that I guess from me as a corporate employer is if you're onboarding well,
really
we can get people
point.
productive
And actually
quickly.
there's another article we've got in this month's TJ about onboarding, and this is by Bill Donahue. And he references Actually, I don't have the link. We've got a short link in the magazine, so I don't know what he actually references. Obviously, some research he references. He says it costs more than 30,000 UK pounds to replace every departing employee in terms of lost output, with the average employee taking 28 weeks to achieve optimum productivity. So there is a reference to that, but I'll have to go and look that up to find out what that is. That will be different in different organisations, industries, we know that. But that's a huge amount of money and time. Eleanor in the chat window says, onboarding to induction to performance needs to be a seamless progressional process. I think we can all give you a round of applause for that one, Eleanor. I don't think you'll find any of us disagreeing with that. Michelle says, in legal, from a business perspective, the faster that they are at their desk, the faster they can start working on billable time. And I need to create an induction that fits with that. Michelle, we did have you on microphone before the session. If your microphone's still working, and you don't mind, perhaps come on the voice and just tell us, how are you trying to create an induction that fits to that? Yeah?
Let's see if I'm working again. Yes? Fantastic. It's depended over the years. So basically within the legal, you've got fee earning staff, and the whole point is that they need to be working on billable time to earn the fees, to make the business money, to pay us all. I've had sessions where I've had them for 2.5 days after HR on their start date, and that goes through all of the different systems. I'm trying not to do that because, as we all know, if you've got people who are sitting in training, they're not going to remember most of it.
Thank you very much for that.
They'll only remember little bits
really
of it,
highlighting some of the
potentially all this stuff they need to know. So I've been trying to chunk it down and asking the questions: what do they need to know initially? What do we need to make sure that they're aware of? And then let's get them back to their seats, or get them to their seats, to then learn, meet the people around them, learn the teams, the businesses, and some of it, as an IT trainer, I can't teach them because I don't know that particular area. And then look at actually spreading out what we originally termed as the induction in a longer process, so that actually they've got a chance to put it into practice, they've got a chance to actually find out what they need to know.
And Sarah says, I've always thought that onboarding was more of a modern term for induction, but now I can see that they both might have merit in their own right. Adam, any thoughts on that before we go into our reflection?
I think Eleanor Mackenzie has summed it up in the chat window as effectively as I can. I think that induction is a core part of the onboarding process, but is not the onboarding process, so they're different. And I think it was Paul earlier who talked about pre-boarding. So I think the key thing about onboarding is it should start from the moment that the offer is made, and it shouldn't be ever just confused with it's an induction. I think they are different. Just as induction is a part of onboarding process, then our ongoing learning and development should become part of the induction process. So to the point of how long should it take, I mean, the research suggests that it takes someone 4 months to feel comfortable and aware of their expectations as they join a new role. So by that nature, then 12 months is too long. But at the same time, I think you have to look at yourself as an organisation and decide if you've got a commitment to ongoing learning and development. And if you have, induction will then flow into just making our employees better and more productive. And I think to Michelle's point, sorry, it was Michelle who you got on the microphone, we all want effective employees who are delivering the most, the highest results for our organisations. That's just what we want. But I think what you have to kind of match with that is that if you continue to develop and invest in your individuals, they will get better. And then subsequently,
brilliant. Thank you very much, Adam. So, and then again, and lots of stuff coming in the chat, people agreeing with Michelle, and that's how they're seeing things. And Debbie has found that reference to that onboarding article that I was reading out. So thank you for that, Debbie. That's why it's always good to have more than one person from your team doing something. So what we're going to do now is, we've had a great conversation around lots of areas, answered your questions. and taken lots of different experiences that you've had. And we're going to go into a reflection piece now and think about that. So we're going to come off webcam, but don't worry, Adam, Paul and Liam and myself are still here. So let's wave a little visual goodbye, and we're going to do some work now about what it is that we're thinking about this. Now, before we get into our reflection, obviously we have to practice our text tool. So go and click the T of the text tool that you have on your screen, and then if you just click anywhere on that slide, on that whiteboard, what you can do is just go and type your name and then click once more to reveal your name, like I've just done. And what we should be able to do then is be able to go and type some stuff on there, and we'll be able to use that then to go and share some thoughts in just a moment. So let's go and have a practice. And if it's not working, don't worry. What you can do is just use the chat window. You've also found, well done, that the very top icon allows you to pick things up and move them around. Yours, someone else's. So if you've typed over someone, it's no problem. We can just pick things up and move it. So that's no problem at all. Also, if you want to, you can have a practice and change the colour of your text. So you just need to click first of all on the screen, then you can change your colour of your text. You don't have to if you don't want to. Okay, it looks to me like we've had a good practice with our text tool, and what we are going to do is make sure that we have a think about this and start reflecting upon what we're going to do. So have a think, from all of what's been said today, what is it you are actually going to do after today's session? So use that text tool, pop something up there. It'd be great if you can put your name up as well. Don't worry if you don't want to, that's absolutely fine. It can be anonymous if you prefer. What is it that you are going to do from today's session? So we've had quite a few conversations, quite a few different topics that we've had a look at. What is it you're going to do? Don't worry if you've written over the top of someone else. You can always use that arrow tool to move things around. And if you're thinking, oh, I want to edit it, you can just use that arrow tool and double click on your writing, and you can change that. If you want to make it a little bit narrower, you can do that like an old-fashioned typewriter. And you can just type, hit return, and that makes it nice and narrow. So let's see some of the things that we've got. I'm going to start at the bottom of the whiteboard just because it's a little bit different to do that. And what we have got here is we've got somebody saying, review the research from Adam about onboarding and look into how to map the emotional journey of our new starter in our company and use the statistics to manage managers' expectations of how long someone could be ready to do the job. Interesting. So Adam, this is one from the research that you shared. What is it you're thinking about, mapping the emotional journey of the new starter? What are your thoughts on that? So Adam, just remember to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, got me, Joe. I think it's an interesting point. I mean, I think it's a hard one to measure, but I think it's important to look at what it means to bring an individual into the organisation. And I think the best way you can do that is to think about how you felt when you've been brought into an organisation. I think most people will have had a poor and a good experience. And if you can think about the impact of a good experience compared to a poor experience, then I think you can really start to envisage the impact that that emotional journey has. Changing a job for anyone is a big new start. It is a kind of an emotional process. And I think we have to marry up the learning and development elements we've touched on today with effectively bringing someone in and then allowing them to perform at the optimum level, which seems to be the other kind of key point that we've discussed that's important to that onboarding process.
Absolutely, and I really like that idea of optimum level, so thank you very much for that, Adam. Gosh, we've got lots of things coming up on our whiteboard. Let's have another look at them. Mitch says, talk to the business to find out what is actually needed before, when, and after they start. Absolutely brilliant. You'll get a huge agreement from all of us here. Look at when the onboarding process is to commence from Con. Thank you very much, Con. We've also got, I think this is all one thing. I'm currently looking at the whole onboarding induction process for our organisation. The majority of induction is done as pre or induction learning process to impact on retention as well. Thank you very much for that. And let me just, oh, people are moving things around. Thank you very much indeed. It's a very busy whiteboard we've got today, which is absolutely excellent. And we've got here, how can I integrate the sniff test in future onboarding solutions? Very good. Work on a program that concentrates on the feelings, winning the hearts and minds before then looking at the skills and knowledge. So, Paul, I think that was speaking a little bit more to what you were talking about, is those kind of feelings, first of all, of hearts and minds, and then the skills and knowledge to get going. So that must be music to your heart.
Yes, it is, very much so. It's that whole process of deciding what is needed when. And in the early stages, you've got the sniff test, as we've discussed. And in fact, onboarding goes all the way back to the advert. It is even before the offer letter, because if you think about it, even the advert is starting to set expectations of who you are as an employer. So that's starting to set expectations around the psychological contract. So there's that whole process all the way through, but a lot of it is understanding what do they absolutely need and when do they need it, rather than flood them with a whole lot of stuff quickly, because that's the easiest way for the company to do it, which is what often happens. So if they don't need to know about X, Y, Z until 1 month in, don't give it to them until 1 month in. But that automatically then means you're probably having to start work towards some sort of digital solution, and all three of us on this webinar can provide that kind of stuff. So I think digital is almost an inevitable part of modern onboarding these days.
Yeah, I think it's an inevitable part of pretty much anything. I'm doing a webinar on Friday all about change in L&D, and the very first thing I talk about is technology, because for some it's the obvious, for some it's the elephant in the room. So you're absolutely right about that.
It's about it's about managing that whole process over a period of time, and you tend to need a digital platform to do that, especially at scale. So yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Louise in the chat window says start with the end in mind is a great way to look at it. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that's here on that whiteboard. What else have we got? Richard says begin to develop a new induction process for retail influenced by today. Oh, Richard, that is absolutely awesome. And Richard, it would be really good to hear about that. I mean, it's great to hear about that anyway. But if you want to kind of share that story with us, especially because it's influenced by today, just let John know. I'm going to put his email address in there, or you can let me know. And we'd absolutely love to have a little blog or an article about it or something like that, and we can chat with you about that a little bit more. So that's really awesome, Richard. Thank you. Understand better the objectives of the induction that we want to build. And Liam, that probably speaks to you, I would have thought, about kind of what is it that we want to achieve here anyway?
I think it needs to be seen from two perspectives. It needs to be seen from the perspective of the employer. They have a selfish reason for doing a good induction, good onboarding process to get someone productive as soon as possible. But I think that often is maybe emphasised too much. It really needs to be down to, and the other speakers laid out as well, down to the emotional attachment from the employee as well. It doesn't matter how good any training is or e-learning or whatever it may be, unless someone feels a sense of belonging. And I think Paul mentioned about the tribe. Unless they feel they actually belong to an organisation, they're probably going to leave, and there's a big cost to hiring new people. So I think that's the key part of it. It needs to be that balance. And you just mentioned around the technology a moment ago. All companies, particularly ones that are doing a lot of hiring, have some sort of onboarding portal or hub or whatever you want to call it. And it can be quite easy to overemphasize all the onboarding training they need to do, the welcome pack, the do's and the don'ts, and who their mentor is, and where they go on a first day, and what their schedule is for that first week. But fundamentally, unless you can give someone a sense of belonging, that they're not going to come and they're not going to stay. And we're going to go back to that alarming statistic at the beginning that just north of 20% of employees churn in the first 45 days. That's staggering, and it's something we all want to avoid. And it's not good for a company, and it's not good for the employee.
No, because especially you get people just coming in one door, out the other. It creates a bit of a reputation, doesn't it? And then people don't engage with them and all sorts of things. So thank you for that, Liam. And back to the whiteboard. Even just something, I love this idea, add pictures of our leaders to our company onboarding document. That's a really tangible, I don't want to say simple because I don't want to denigrate that, but it's a tangible way that you can just add a little bit of life to that. So that's a really great tactic that you can do. Report and show proof. Look more into how we can ensure the managers are continuing to make the employee feel comfortable once induction is over. That's awesome. Follow up with the links provided. Yes, lots of stuff has been shared today, so really good stuff to go and have a look at. Use PPP. I'm not entirely sure what that means. So if that was you, you can share that in the chat window. I can think of a few different options for that, so I'll let you explain that in the chat window if you want to. We've also got invest in the induction. Absolutely. Caroline says review our current onboarding agenda and think of different ways to improve the current processes. Brilliant. Challenge managers who insist that the myths are true. Yeah, that's why I like to share those links. Download the free stuff. Excellent. And we had something added in here. Let me see if I can go and read that. So basically going and refine it, look at our current plans, include a framework for pre-boarding and onboarding. So thank you for that. Absolutely brilliant. And Howard, you shared in the chat window your PPP was Perception, Performance, Probation. Thank you, Howard, for sharing that. Well, we've come towards the end of another session. So I can't believe, every month, I can't believe how quickly that time goes. It's absolutely brilliant. We do have some webinars coming up, but I do want to say before that, a thank you to our speakers. Now my computer has just slowed down. Here we go. So thank you to Paul, Liam and Adam. Paul, last super quick thoughts from you?
Go forth and sniff merrily, something like that. I don't know. But if anybody wants to have a chat about that or other ideas give me a call or drop me an email. Happy to talk. So.
Brilliant. And Paul is always lovely to chat to and a bit of a laugh as well. So thank you very much, Paul. And Liam, last thoughts?
Just think about what's in it for the employee when they do onboarding. It's very easy to get suckered into what we all need within training development and HR. So what's in it for the employee? Why do they want to do the onboarding?
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And lastly, from Adam, last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, thanks to everyone for joining. I think we can broadly see that onboarding has been a forgotten process for many organisations for a long time, and those that take it seriously and look to improve the process and the output for the people joining are going to deliver a better experience for those joining and ultimately deliver better performance from their organisation.
Yeah, and that's what we're all here for. So that's brilliant. Thank you very much to our speakers. They've been fabulous as always. As you know, our sessions are always available on trainingjournal.com. You can just go to our webinars page and they will be there. You can continue the conversation on Twitter with #TJwow, and there's loads of ways to get involved with us as well. I'm just going to paste some of these into the chat box for you. Also, what we've got is a survey. If you're thinking, gosh darn it, I wish I'd subscribed to Training Journal, don't worry. If you go and fill in our survey and tell us what you think about our website, our TJwow, our magazine, whatever it is, you can get a 3-month free digital subscription to TJ, and there's prizes and stuff you might be able to win as well. So our next webinars, well, we've got coming up on the 7th of February, not far away. This is one that's a little bit different actually, taking the uncertainty out of the future role of the L&D professional. I'm going to be honest, I'm going to look forward to this one because it's all about me. What it is, it's my presentation that I delivered at Online Educa Berlin at the very end of last year, and it's going to be full of loads of discussion. It was actually only a 20-minute presentation, but we're going to have an hour online, so we're going to have loads of time for conversation. On the 13th of February, we've got about virtual reality, so we're going to be having a chat about that. We've got some interesting speakers coming up on that. And then our awards are opening up in March. So we've got a discussion about why you can't afford to miss entering our awards. So you can go and register for all of those. And as Michelle put, is anyone going to Learning Technologies 2018? That's next week. I look forward to seeing you, and she's going to be on a stand, so keep an eye out. And Con saying enjoy. And that's absolutely it. So thank you so much. Thank you again to our speakers. Thank you to John for tweeting. And thank you to Debbie as well for coming online and having a chat. But most of all, thank you to all of you guys attending in the chat window. You're absolutely fabulous as always. And we look forward to seeing you hopefully very soon. Thank you and see you next time. Goodbye.